All right, we are on air. Happy Thursday, December 17th, everybody. We're going to do a quick meeting, maybe not so quick, for Backdrop CMS development tasks, development and infrastructure. We'll start with general announcements. As usual, we have Dragon t-shirts and hoodies available on our website. If you go to backdropcms.org/contribute, you can make a donation of $25 to get an adorable t-shirt. Nate is sporting one right now, which is nice. White-ish, very comfortable, soft fabric, adorable dragon on it. And if you're already a Backdrop CMS developer and or contributor and you want one, you have already earned it. So you can send an email to info@backdropcms.org with your address and preferred size, and we'll send one out. If you want a hoodie, you can make a donation for $50, and we can mail one anywhere in the United States. If you live outside of the United States, you want a hoodie, we can negotiate on additional cost. We'll look it up and see how much it costs, and we can send one out to you for a reasonable surcharge, just so that we're not hurting ourselves in the process. But yeah, they're available. We're going to be bringing them with us to camps and conferences and meetups and whatever around the country or world or wherever it is that we are. So if you want one and you want to wait in person and try one on, that's also totally fine. Next place you can get one in person is going to be Sand Camp in San Diego in February. So keep an eye out for that. Free PHP Storm licenses are now available. We have, since the last meeting, reached out to the people at PHP Storm and gotten new updated licenses for all of our contributors. And they have a new fancy, sophisticated way of dealing with license keys, where last year we kind of gave everybody the same license key, and that license key was good for a certain number of uses. This year, everybody has their own license key, and we have them available for Backdrop Contrib developers. So that means if you are a member of the Backdrop-Contrib group on GitHub, send an email to info@backdropcms.org, and we will distribute said license key. We've got a bunch for this coming year, and I think they're all good for a year from their start date now, which is also a little fancier, whereas a couple months ago we were like, we'll give you one, but it only works for a little while. This is actually legitimately going to be good for you for a year. So definitely, if you're interested in that, let us know. If you are a Backdrop contributor, but you are not yet a member of the Contrib group, we can also help get you in there. So shoot us an email or tweet or use the contact form on our website. Whatever, we can hook you up. All right, big exciting news. This Tuesday, Nate and I did a sprint with Tim Otten from the CiviCRM team, and we spent an entire day trying to see if we could get Civi to work with Backdrop, and by the end of the day, we actually had Civi mostly working with Backdrop. So it took one day to do a port of the Drupal module that was in there. Nate did some work on some of the integration with CiviCRM in CiviCRM core. I did a bunch of work on the Drupal module, and we got, by the end of the day, you could actually see in your Backdrop website your CiviCRM data, which I thought was fantastic. There's obviously a bunch more work to do to get it to be to the point where it's comparable with what it does on Drupal. There's a bunch of supporting modules that haven't been ported yet, but I think that it's looking really good, the fact that we could get it up and running within one day with a little help from the core team. Linked in our agenda, and we can post these in the meeting too, is right now we have nightly dev builds that are including the Backdrop integration. So if you want to help us work on it, you can grab one of those. It pulls from all of the associated repositories where we're committing the Backdrop work and bundles them together. It's currently labeled unstable because it's not ready for production use yet, but it is great if you want to just give it a test and see how it's going. It's a great place to do that. We now have a CiviCRM-Backdrop repository, which includes all of the modules for Backdrop that provide the CiviCRM integration. So the way that it works with CiviCRM is that you drop the entire CiviCRM project into your modules directory, but then within that huge project there's a subset of directories that contain the modules that actually handle the integration. So if you're wanting to put this together yourself, you grab CiviCRM, you grab the Backdrop integration, you throw the whole thing into your modules directory, and then you get everything you need. So it's a separate project so that you can either drop in the Drupal configuration or the Backdrop or the WordPress or the Joomla or whatever, and we've got one of those up and running right now. So that's very exciting. Nate also posted a link to the CiviCRM Jira issue, which is where we're documenting all of the progress we're making on getting Civi working with Backdrop. So this is super exciting because we recently went to a bunch of events that were not Drupal events. They were just tech people, nonprofit events. And we found that there was this huge demand for Backdrop, but also Backdrop with Civi. And so we decided that we should make it a priority to get Backdrop working with Civi, because that right there is our market. And if we can meet their needs, then that's great. Going forward, yes, Backdrop is going to be easiest to use for people who are already using Drupal, but going forward, Drupal events are going to be more and more for people who are interested in Drupal 8, and we need to kind of focus on our market, which are going to be people who maybe won't be at Drupal events because they have other things going on that are more relevant. They'll be at tech conferences or they'll be at nonprofit-focused events, and if we can make sure that we meet their needs too, I think that's going to be overwhelmingly more and more important. So great progress on that front. I'm super excited that we were able to make as much progress as we were in the first day. Later today, we have another meeting with the folks at CiviCRM to figure out how we're going to handle ongoing updates, responsibilities, issue queue management, pull request processes, all of that stuff, just to make sure that we can figure out how to get everything we need done in an orderly fashion with collaboration. So very, very excited that these open source projects are going to be working together in the future. Woohoo! Okay. That was the most exciting announcement. We don't have anything new from the PMC, but I do want to turn it over to Nate for community growth update.
Hey, sorry, I thought I was muted when I coughed, but it's not. Okay, so community growth. So we like to take a little bit of time to talk about all of the projects that we have ported or created for Backdrop CMS. We currently have 179 total projects for Backdrop CMS in the GitHub contrib group. That's github.com/backdrop-contrib. One new project has been created since last week. That's exciting to see, as always. We have 111 total projects that are listed on backdropcms.org. And the number is lower there because only modules that have official releases on GitHub will synchronize over to backdropcms.org. So 111, that's one new project since last week. And we have a total of 143 releases on backdropcms.org. That's two new releases since last week. One of which I know was the Google Analytics module we ported like ages ago, but we hadn't actually made a release. Sorry, everybody. But now it's out there because we'll talk about that later, because we set up analytics on backdropcms.org. We currently have 42 total members of the Backdrop contrib group. Like Jen mentioned earlier, if you join the group, you can also get a PHP Storm license for your Backdrop development. But you have to join the group in order to do that. And if you would like to apply to be a part of the group, you can visit github.com/backdrop-ops/contrib. And that's our issue queue where we process anybody who's interested in joining the group and porting modules over to Backdrop. Let's see, infrastructure tasks. There's some kind of news and infrastructure that we need to talk about. One issue is we're currently working on making it so that data that is sent to our servers, backdropcms.org, from individual Backdrop sites starts recording the projects that those modules have, or those sites have installed. We've been collecting that data, but we haven't been able to process it correctly. Last week, we had some progress there that we think that we have the number crunching script finally fixed so that we can take all of this data that we've been accruing over the past several months and crunch it into historical usage data. Sorry, I've got cat problems. Let's see. After we get that put together, we want to add in some additional powers to that update checking, like recording which features are enabled within individual sites, like whether or not you have clean URLs turned on or off, or all kinds of other things. That's always the one I think of, but there's lots of settings that we could potentially record and send that information to backdropcms.org so that we could make informed decisions about what features are needed or used within core and which ones are not. Let's see. That issue for expanding update module is issue number 99 in the backdropcms.org issue queue. And then we also want to add charts. That's kind of just a nice to have once we get this usage information up. And that's issue 98 in the backdropcms.org queue. Let's see, Drush for Backdrop. It's our longest standing infrastructure issue. It's issue number 47 in the Backdrop issue queue. Things are coming along. We have a fairly usable version of Drush. I should actually say an extension for Drush that makes it so the latest version of Drush 8 also recognizes and can be used with Backdrop. But the number of commands that are currently available are somewhat limited. So that repository is under github.com/quicksketch/backdropdrush. And that's basically just in my personal repository until we get some further progress on that and kind of get it stabilized. And then we'll probably move it into the contrib group. And then from there, we'll consider what to do with it, whether it will be merged into core or whether we can get that into Drush. Like, all of these things are options, but we'll need to evaluate which one is the best once we actually have this thing working. Yeah, Jen just added, like, do we have a meta issue to add more Drush commands? I think what we probably could do for the time being is just use that sandbox and add individual issues, like saying, you know, port this command and port that command, rather than filling up the core queue with, you know, meta and subsequent commands. Maybe just start populating issues in that individual repository. Cool. Let's see. The next item we have here is GitHub automation. We have a long-standing issue over in backdropcms.org's issue queue, issue number 7, to kind of synchronize the tags between issues, because all of our members of the Backdrop issues group can label and tag individual issues, but they can't actually label and tag pull requests. And so we want to make it so that pull requests are synchronized, have their tags synchronized with issues. Because right now we just have a big list of pull requests, and none of them have any tags or any labels or anything to separate them, because only the people that can commit to the core repository can add those labels, and that's not where all of our work is happening. All of our work is happening over in the issues queue, and the issues queue is where all the labels come from. So we'd like to make it so that those synchronize between those two repositories. Here's the big issue for infrastructure, is that as of yesterday, we haven't fixed this yet, but as of yesterday, Travis CI basically is totally broken. What happened is they switched their entire infrastructure from using their previous hosting provider, which is Blocks, over to Google Compute Engine. And basically, Google Compute Engine is like way, way slower, like on the order of like 6 times slower. And so what is happening right now is that all of our pull requests are failing tests because they're all maxing out the time. So previously our tests would run in like 18, 20 minutes or something like that. But Travis CI kicks you out after 50 minutes of processing, and the new Google Compute Engine servers can only get through about like half of our test suite before they time out. So it's a lot slower. There are some things we can try to speed that up. Like right now we're running a lot of tests in parallel, and maybe that's causing some additional issues on these new servers. But for the time being, from the documentation on Travis CI's website, it looks like you can just simply opt out and go back to the old servers for the time being, up until sometime in July, when that's their final cutover date. So I'm hoping what we'll do is we'll switch back to the old servers until things kind of settle down, because even lots of other people are having issues on the new servers as well, and I think for the time being we can just kind of hop back over to the old servers, let them work out their issues, and then we can switch over to the new servers, hopefully which will have increased performance by the time that we go back over there. So that's issue 1422, and we'll post updates there. Since this is relatively new, it just happened yesterday, we haven't had any progress on that yet. Jen, why don't I pass this back over to you on the talking about the website. There's some updates here, I do believe.
Sure. So I think maybe since our last meeting, I went ahead and implemented most of Darius's design for the new user profile page. And I filled out my profile, and I filled out half of Nate's profile, and I think Wes filled out his profile. So there's 3 pages you can actually see it on in a minute. But if anybody else wants to help us test this thing, send me an email. Or tweet or let us know in chat or whatever, and we can create accounts for all of you. You can go and fill out your profile page and take a look at what it looks like. The blocker on releasing that to the general public is that the edit form for your profile is kind of a mess. So, well, yeah, maybe we should check the permissions and make sure users can view other users' profile pages too. That might not be set up yet. So Wes had access denied messages being delivered on his page. I don't know why mine would work and yours wouldn't. Meh, we can figure that out. There's something weird going on there. But anyway, we have implemented Darius's designs. My favorite part is the big fancy banner image that was not in any of our minds when we asked him to do it. And he's like, you know, it would look good. And he posted that. What we're going to try and do is get some branding assets for Backdrop that we can use consistently across all platforms for like a banner image on our Twitter account that we can also provide as a default image for people who create accounts on backdropcms.org, so we can have that same image consistently across our site if people don't have one yet. But otherwise, all of the other content is either there if you've entered it or not if you don't. And we're going to start opening this up to the general public hopefully around January 1st to get more people to create accounts. I think almost all of the information we want to collect from people is already there. There's 2 modules that need to be ported, the languages module and the countries module for 777 that just provide field types with additional validation. And as soon as we get those ported, then we'll add those and everything will be complete. I think it's looking fantastic so far, but there's a couple of little changes that I missed in implementing the initial design, and then we have the edit form coming too. So after we get that done, then people will be able to log in, and we're going to start allowing them to do other things like posting websites into a showcase, which will be next. We want to be able to let people do single sign-on with GitHub so that if you have a GitHub account, you don't need to create a new account for Backdrop. You can just click the link, sign in with GitHub, and all of your GitHub info will be pulled over. And we want to do a little bit more work on the modules, themes, and layouts pages as well. I just noticed yesterday that we have a lot of modules on our website, and the original designs for the modules page had filters so that you could find exactly what you were looking for in that modules list, and we just didn't have any of that built out yet. And we're like, we only have 20 modules, it's not important. Well, now we have hundreds of modules, or more than 100 modules. So I think it's getting more and more important for people to actually be able to use those filters. So I think my next focus is going to be on getting those filters done. Wes has volunteered to work on the edit form. I think we're totally in good shape in terms of our allowing users to join our community by January 1st. So very exciting. Other things we want to do on our primary website include a service provider or contractor listing, an event calendar, a job board, and a blog. What? Yeah, a blog, really. We have this new section in our meeting here for marketing tasks that we need to start thinking about for Backdrop. As developers, Nate and I are not super great at marketing, so last week we put out a call for anyone, and this continues this week if you are interested in helping us with marketing. We created a bunch of issues in the backdropcms.org queue for things that we need to do related to marketing. We've gotten a bunch of progress already since last week. Yesterday or the day before, we went and set up our Google Analytics account, which apparently we had set up a year ago but never actually properly implemented. So now we have Google Analytics both on backdropcms.org and api.backdropcms.org, so we can see what people are doing on our website, which is useful, which will help us try and figure out what we want them to do on our website and then try and get them to the places we want them to be. more easily. So that'll be really great. In order to draw traffic to our website, we also have plans to do things like write blog posts. Now, building a blog is something I'm very good at, but writing words that go into a blog is something that I'm not very motivated to do. So we definitely need somebody who's a good wordsmith to help us write some of this content. We have a bunch of good ideas about things that maybe should end up on the blog, but just aren't actually doing it. We actually already have a content type that we use for one blog post will go right to the homepage, like the most recent one. But we don't have a blog page, and we don't have an RSS feed. I was looking at some of the page not found errors on our website. People are currently trying to find the RSS feed of our website, or robots are. It doesn't exist, so we should make one so people can use it, which would be great. We should tell people what we're doing. That would be good too. And just having a little more activity there to show that, you know, we are a community, we are doing things, progress is happening. Talking about these meetings would be good. Talking about other big news would be good. PHP 7 support, CiviCRM integration. There's a bunch of good stuff going on that we need to do a better job of telling people about. So I just think, like, you know, a once a week little, this is what's going on in Backdrop, maybe once every 2 weeks would be great. If we could get somebody to write those for us, that would be even better. So definitely, if you're interested in helping us with marketing, let us know. Backdrop CMS itself, the product, has a bunch of stuff up coming soon. We are going to issue a 1.2.3 release fairly soon that will contain backports from Drupal 7.40. Whenever we get around to those, there's nothing super urgent in there that is demanding that we do it right away. But I think that once we get those in, that would be a good kind of milestone for getting that next release out. And that release, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, will also contain the PHP 7 support. So that would also merit a newsletter going out to people saying they can use Backdrop on PHP 7, which will make it faster. PHP 7 is really fast, so that's super exciting. 1.3.0 is the next minor release. It's scheduled for January 15th. And it's supposed to be a user experience release where we're taking some time to go back to the stuff that we've put in earlier and kind of put some polish on it. We have a ton of issues tagged with the milestone 1.3.0 that are all going to be user experience improvements for Backdrop, and we're going to try and get as many of those done as we can by 1.3. A lot of those issues are novice. A lot of them are quick ones to do. So if you only have 10-15 minutes and you want to make some significant difference in the improvement of Backdrop, there's a bunch of low-hanging fruit there, which could be really great. There's also a lot of issues there with pull requests, and we could definitely use help reviewing pull requests. So if you want to spend 15 minutes helping Backdrop but don't want to write any code, you could grab a patch, apply it, and then give it a test and see if the thing that we were complaining about in the issue has been resolved satisfactorily or not. We can have someone else review the code. If you can review the change that was made, that would be really beneficial for us as well. Some of these things that we're trying to work on are improving the layout module UI. The way you drag and drop blocks into places has some issues that need to be resolved. Adding new things that you can add to your layouts, like the one block per field issue. Adding contexts. There's a bunch of kind of headier, more complicated follow-up issues that aren't necessarily user interface related, but are user experience related that we'd like to get done for that. And all of those layouts follow-ups are in issue 345 on GitHub. We also have a handful of rich text editor follow-ups, which is at issue 1087. Same general story with the rich text editor. We put it in at a minimum viable product. We know it's a little clunky, and there's a couple of tiny things we could fix that would make a big improvement, and they are noted in that issue. There is one remaining administration view that we didn't get into core initially, and that's the comments listing. If we could get that converted into a view, then we could put a little check mark on that. All administration pages are now views, which is something Drupal 8 has. We haven't gotten it done because there is a views bulk operation for managing comments that has not yet been created. So the view is pretty easy to build. The bulk operation is slightly less so, but we could definitely use some help in that area. We want to change some terminology in our menu system so that we say edit when you're editing content and configure when you're going to be saving the results of that form into a configuration file as opposed to the database. We think if we can use those words consistently, it'll start to make more sense to people which things are which. Right now, it's all kind of a big hodgepodge all over the place. So getting those cleaned up, I think, will help people out a lot. We want to add a notification icon to core. So this is, for example, your website is out of date. If you visit an administration page, you get a big, ugly red error on every single page. And if you visit the front end of the site, you'll never know there's anything wrong. What we were thinking about doing is just putting a little icon in the admin bar that would say, hey, visit your status report, something's up. And then that way you'll see that on every page, whether you're on the front or the back, and it'll encourage you to go to the status report to find out what the ugly red error is, rather than just printing it on every page and training people to ignore red messages that might be important. We have the project browser. This is issue 1399. Set so that the goal is so that you can go to your modules page and you can browse available modules for Backdrop from the modules page, or browse themes from the themes page, or browse layouts from the layouts page. Browse things that are not already on your website. And so we have this browser, we have a server set up, we're trying to get it integrated. It would be fantastic if we could get that in by 1.3. That would make a huge difference to user experience. I'm not sure it's close enough to do that, but I think that we could try. It would be fantastic if we could get that in. That's definitely something that would make a really big difference to new users of Backdrop not needing to go to our website to find what they want. We also want to clean up the field UI. This is a huge task that has been on everybody's to-do list since Drupal 6, maybe even before that. I mean, people didn't complain that much in Drupal 5. But it's definitely a hard one. I don't think it's looking very likely for Backdrop 1.3, but I would like to keep it on everybody's minds, because getting an easier way to build content types is something that's definitely going to be important for the success of Backdrop. I mean, what makes us different from something like WordPress, where most pages are just a title and body, is the ability to add fields. And if we can make it easier for people to add fields, then that feature would become more powerful. More people would use it. People would complain less. We like complaining, but we should complain less. So if you want to take a look at all of the issues we have marked for 1.3, you can check in searching the issue queue, check the milestone 1.3.0. There's a lot of little ones in there. The big ones are ones that I just mentioned. But since 1.3 is not release where we're focusing on new features, we're also starting to think about the kinds of things that we want in 1.4. And so far, field UI issue number, Luke, is number 779. But for Backdrop 1.4, we're starting to think that we will rewrite and include some version of references module. We also are thinking that we might need some version of a redirect module. And perhaps also a new front-end theme, which I think might be becoming our most pressing issue in order to get people who are interested in using Backdrop, actually using Backdrop. Giving them a usable front-end theme out of the box is going to be more and more important. So that issue is 1361. If you want to take a look at our official roadmap, it's at backdropcms.org/roadmap. Again, we've only added stuff there that we have definitely decided we are doing for a certain release. So we don't have anything listed yet for 1.4. But I think we're kind of zoning in on references and redirect, but we'll post that once we get closer to 1.3. Things we're always working on Backdrop Core is improving user experience, though we do have a special release scheduled in January for that. If you find anything related to user experience tagged with that release or not, and you can get it fixed now, it'll go in the next release. So the better we can make the user experience, the better the whole product. And also things that are of particular interest is developer experience. Drupal gets a bad rap for being hard to learn, hard to use, hard to code for. We started with Drupal. We've got all of the same problems Drupal has. And so as you're working with software, coding either front end or back end, and you find something that's really weird, write it down in the issue queue. Let us know it's really weird, and put a tag at the beginning of the issue title, DX in square brackets. And that's something that we've got to improve to make people like working with Backdrop. There's definitely a ton of stuff we've already improved, but there is a whole lot more. We can make it a lot better. And I think we just need to kind of keep a holistic view of what is it that's going to make working with this software more enjoyable for developers in the future. All right, every Thursday after this meeting, we spend some time together in IRC, on Gitter, in the GitHub issue queue, and we try and work through some of these issues. Sometimes what we work through is code, sometimes what we work through is marketing, sometimes what we work through is design, whatever it is, we try to get together on Thursdays. If you don't have time on Thursday or you can't get time off work during the work week or anything you can get any other time is definitely appreciated. There are almost always people in IRC and in the issue queue, and if you need help from someone, you know, Gitter now sends emails to people, so there's lots of ways that you can get in touch with the community even if you can't be available on Thursday afternoons. But Thursday afternoons are a good time because there are a lot of people around if you want to get involved then. We also have a Reddit, I should mention, in addition to an IRC channel, which is found Backdrop, the GitHub issue queue, and gitter.im, which I think is backdrop-issues for the public one. Our Reddit is at reddit.com/r/backdrop. And I don't think there's that many people in it already, but it's the only forum-like place we have at the moment. We are evaluating other options. We're going to try and figure out what we can do with a forum where we can let people talk to each other in a way that's a little more conducive to community building. But that's what we've got for now. Upcoming events. Meetings like this one happen every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. We have a design meeting very similar to this one that happens at 12 noon every other Thursday, so fortnightly. There was one today. There'll be another one on the 31st. We have a bunch of upcoming Drupal events that are Backdrop friendly that we will be attending. So far, there is Sand Camp in February, Drupal Camp Utah in March, and Drupal Camp Chicago at the end of March. Anyone who is presenting at any Drupal camps upcoming or is organizing any Drupal camps and they want Backdrop people to be there or are giving a talk and would like people to know about it, definitely let us know. You can send an email to info@backdropcms.org pretty soon. You'll be able to log into our website and post your own events. But it is nice to have a little kind of calendar where people can go and check and find out where you can talk to other people about Backdrop in person as opposed to online. And that's what we've got on our schedule coming up. If you want to give a talk for Backdrop and don't want to write your own talk, we have open source slides in the Backdrop Ops group. Right now, I think it only contains 1 or 2 talks in there, but if anyone writes another talk or modifies those, we'd love to have more copies of slides in their resources for people to use to tell other people about Backdrop. All right, I should also mention, because it is now December 17th, that the first Backdrop ever book should be out right now. I'm checking for it on Apress. Buy book. There it is. So it was written by Todd Tomlinson, I think, who wrote the Pro Drupal development book as well as a bunch of other books. Apress is a great publisher. I'm so excited to see this book. I want to buy it right now, but I'll wait till the end of the meeting. So first Backdrop book, it's written by somebody who knows the landscape really well. He was in the HDQ asking some good questions. Not on Amazon yet. Yeah, okay. Well, Nate will tweet about it when it appears on Amazon, but it does look like you can buy it directly from Apress now if you want. And Eric says that Todd is also working on a pure Backdrop book that will come out in April. Well, that's exciting. So yeah, I can't wait. This is going to be great. Yay Backdrop. Yay community. Thank you everybody who put in time and effort in that. I know there was a bunch of craziness around deadlines, and I'm so excited to see that it's out so soon. I mean, that's probably the whole point, right? Get it out before Christmas season, but holiday season. Very exciting. All right, back to the agenda. Anything else? Anyone else wants to talk about? Any open forum questions? Anything we should talk about every week? Anything we shouldn't talk about every week? We got it quiet today. All right, well, if you guys don't have anything to add, I guess we can wrap the meeting, go back to IRC, Gitter.
I would love to talk about blocks if anyone, maybe not everyone has to talk about it, but just the custom block things, just because
Okay.
for some reason I really feel strongly about this, and I'm not sure why.
Okay, so I think I know what this is, but why don't you fill everyone else in about the problem with blocks?
Well, right now we're just, there's several different proposals to change how we're using blocks and layouts. Right now we sort of have the current custom block implementation, which is storing it as content, but it's not an entity. So there's two proposals, like one to make those custom blocks into entities so they're fieldable and reusable, and the other one is to make individual like custom text blocks that can be inserted into single layouts. And then I'm kind of proposing that maybe we try to do some combination of the two, where we have reusable blocks that are saved into config that could be used on more than one layout. So I mean, just there's like 3 different ways that people are proposing to do custom blocks, and it'd be good to talk about which we actually want to pursue and what people are thinking for because I haven't heard much. I can't think of why we'd need to field blocks.
I can give you a couple good use cases for that. But okay, to back up a step, I am in favor of all of these methods. Basically what we're talking about is panels, which I love. And panels has this concept of a reusable content pane, right? Which is something that is stored in configuration, but that also has a record that you can, it is an entity, you can pull it, you can embed as many times as you want, whatever. Yes, I think we should have a piece of content that is stored in the database that is fieldable as a block type. I don't care what we call it. If we want to change its name to be content block or some whatever, we can call it whatever. But the use case for that is that right now what people have been doing in Drupal for a really long time is creating nodes that don't have pages, things for like a homepage slide, right? If you have a slideshow and you need to have a view of 8 of them, and you don't ever want anyone to go to a page for any one of these things, but you want them to rotate, and they have a title, and they have an image, and they have a link. And some of those links are off-site, maybe some of them are on-site, whatever. Like there's, you now have 3 fields that you need on this thing that is a fieldable thing, but it shouldn't have a page. So it shouldn't have meta tags, it shouldn't have a path, it shouldn't have any of the stuff that is associated with a node usually. So there's this module in Drupal that I use all the time called Rabbit Hole that lets you block access to the pages for those nodes. But what you actually wanted was a fieldable block. So the slideshow is a perfect use case for something like that, but there's a whole bunch of other things too that sometimes come up, like maybe file entities, or I don't know, you might have a listing of people, right? And these people are like administrators, and so you have a content type called administrator, but nobody ever goes to an individual administrator page. You only ever look at them in a list of other ones. But instead of having maybe you have like a list of one class of administrator on one page and another one's another, like categorized with taxonomy. I mean, you can have like a very complicated use case for things that need to be organized like content, but don't have pages like nodes. So that is the use case for a fieldable block. So that's.
And could we just add like a checkbox to just the regular content module with nodes and just like have a thing like whether or not it should provide a page? I mean, that seems like a very, very simple solution.
Yeah, well, the checkbox is a simple solution. Architecturally building that thing is not, because part of node module is /node, and the way that you get to that thing is like /node/nid. But we already have this in blocks. All we need to do is say block is an object that extends entity, and entities are already pageless nodes. So both solutions are valid, right? The question is like, which way do we go? I think that doing a fieldable block is what seems the most natural. I'm not sure that's, I don't know. I think anyone's opinion could go any way, and I'm not sure there's a right or wrong answer.
Yeah, and I think we're facing sort of an over-complexity of just how Drupal did things. Like it's sort of like abstracted different page types into content, like into different content types, and then we're having entities, and it's almost like a double abstraction. And yeah, it's very, we're sort of stuck with a lot of legacy stuff. It almost seems like I wish instead of doing entity, everything became a node. But, you know, so it's...
Yep, that's definitely one way of doing it. But that's where we're going with that. Let's talk about configuration blocks, or whatever we're going to call these other things too, because this is the piece that's missing right now from Backdrop, and there's an issue to build them, which is we want to put a thing in a panel which is just some text, right? It can have HTML in it or not, but it's just text. It doesn't need to have a database entry. It's not going to be published or unpublished. It's not going to be edited by editors that are separate from those who are managing layouts. It's just a thing you want in your sidebar. I definitely think we need to have that. That's something that is hard to do right now without that feature. You have to kind of build something and put it in the sidebar, which is kind of frustrating. I also like the idea of those things being reusable, right? This is something that panels came up with as an afterthought as well, where they were like, people want to reuse these things. Let's build in a checkbox and store it in a way that we can access them later. I think that, I mean, I don't know, maybe technically how to solve that problem. Like, we might have to have a separate config file for each, what are we calling, config block or whatever it is, and then your layout configuration would have to reference the block config file to pull in the content. But then that way, that block content is stored as config rather than a record in your database.
Right. That's sort of what I'm proposing. Maybe we can call them custom layout blocks or something.
Yeah. I don't like the name custom layout block, but that's because layout doesn't mean anything and block doesn't mean anything, and putting them together doesn't make them mean anything more.
I think blocks mean something. They're basically a square you drop into the things. I mean, it's you know, we could use pane instead, but and I think there's sort of like different use cases between the custom content blocks that were sealable and be listed probably in the content area or something like that, and then just the ones that are placed individually in the like, it sounds like the custom content blocks will almost probably be used more with views to create lists of them or something.
Yeah.
Whereas these custom layout blocks are pretty much only going to be added using the layout.
But every block is in a layout, so calling it a layout block doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just like custom. We'll just call that a custom block then, or something.
Yeah.
Or custom text block is fine.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of storing each block in its own config file so they can be referenced across multiple layouts. And then maybe we want to have a checkbox asking if it should be listed for reuse or not, just so it's like when you pull up the add a new block, you don't get overwhelmed with too many individual one-off things. So maybe just, but then I'd say primarily start with the making it reusable and then just sort of hide it if it's not intended for reuse, rather than tying the block, rather than saving it inside of the layout configuration, because then you end up having to duplicate it, like the same footer block in all of your layouts, and then you can't edit it in just one place. So
yeah, I think that sounds good.
So I think that would be a change. So there's a pull request now, but I think that's adding it to the layout config, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of asking perhaps that we not merge that pull request and instead do one that stores it as config files.
So in Backdrop land, we like to merge things all the time and make them better later, as opposed to in Drupal where we want to get it right the first time. So I think that I would be in favor of merging it, even if it's not perfect, just because we don't have this functionality now. And I think that if what we have to do later is write an update hook and pull out the content of the block and save it in another config file, that's a fairly straightforward update hook to write. And I would much rather get something done than not.
Yeah, right now the pull request isn't really ready to merge yet anyway, because it doesn't have any tests. So if the rewritten one can be done first, then that's great. But yeah, it's really kind of just whichever one gets done first.
Okay.
Well, I don't think that either of these are probably going to be ready for a January release, though, right? Or is someone going to do all the testing? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It does seem like they're pretty close. Like I know that kind of related layout issue, the one field per or one block per field issue. That one's ready to go. Other than it doesn't have any tests. Um, so even, I mean, it doesn't even need real extensive testing because it's basically just testing the concept. It doesn't need to test every possible field. It just needs to test that fields in general work. So
one block per field. What's that?
Yeah, the one block per field. Basically, it's not necessarily one block per field, but it basically allows you to...
It's a field block?
Yeah, it allows you that if you're on a node page or on a user page or whatever, that you can place individual fields for that entity wherever you want.
Yeah, as long as you aren't just creating an individual block for each field instance, because that would be a lot of blocks.
No, we're actually expanding the way blocks work. That we're completing some functionality from panels that we didn't get in the initial version of Backdrop that makes it so that a single block can have have children, basically. So there's only one block for a field, and it happens to provide one instance of itself for every possible field. So there's actually only one entry in hook block info, but under the right context, it creates a bunch of subblocks.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things, and I like your idea, Mike, of basically treating all blocks as though they could be all config blocks, as if they could be reusable in the future.
Yeah.
Because you're right that I think in panels, once you make the decision that something is reusable or not, well,
you can't switch it later, I don't think.
Actually, Jen, do you know? Can you change it later?
You can uncheck the box, but I think the database entry stays there.
Huh. I thought, well, if it did change it, because I'm pretty sure it does save it directly in the panels configuration, and then if you check the box, then it makes a different database item for that reusable block.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I don't think, are those reusable blocks actually exportable?
Only if you use UUID.
Yeah, so they're kind of not really exportable.
I think what happens is the config for the panel is always in the panel, but it just copies from the reusable source in the database into the panel config every time you use it.
Huh. Well, that's
very hacky.
And then it references the it's a they added it later.
Yeah. I also wonder what we're really giving people some new opportunities here. I'm not sure if people would start just creating their entire site out of config blocks. It is possible, I suppose.
Why not?
Yeah, I know, but well, why not? Would be if you end up with thousands of config blocks, you're going to have there are going to be repercussions from doing that.
People will do it anyway. I mean, Panoply does that already. It's fine.
And that's where maybe having the list for reuse checkbox is good, because then when you go to add, just anything that's like a one-off block won't necessarily come up, and you won't have to sort through too many of these blocks.
Yeah, well, that's what I was worried about, is that if we always save one config block, make it a separate config file, regardless of whether or not it's, quote, reusable or not, you still could end up with some issues if you literally had thousands of them that, when the config system gets the directory listing of all of the config files, it's going to have to loop through, an extra 1,000 individual config blocks to get to, something that's completely unrelated, like the list of views or something like that.
That'll need a lot of blocks.
Yeah, well, anyway, something to think about.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we're going to reach any real solid conclusions here, because there's virtues to every approach, and there's kind of downsides to every approach.
Yeah, and I feel like we have other sort of things that need to be done in the future. Maybe I'm finding working with the current implementation of the config manager problematic when using version control. And I still haven't figured out a system that works perfectly well with that. I thought I had a perfect system, but then what happens, I just encountered this thing where if I added a field on the live site and copied both the database and the config files down to my local site. Anyway, I'm still working on it, trying to figure this out, but we need to sort of look at that at some point.
Yeah, we're having some issues. Actually, well, we've had some issues, I should say. I think that we've got them resolved, but when using Git to manage them, the file ownership permissions can be really an issue. But like if you do a Git pull as your user, then your user owns those files. But if you create a new view, then the web user owns those files. And I thought I fixed it initially by making our user, so on backdropcms.org, the user is Backdrop and the group is www. And so I added Backdrop to the www group so that all the files it made would be owned by www. And I was like, okay, that looks like that's all good. So now the web server can write to files that I'm managing in Git. Unfortunately, we found the converse was not true. When the web server made a file, the Backdrop user couldn't write to them because by default, the web server will make things writable by its user, but not writable by its group. And Backdrop is only in the group, not actually the owner. So we fixed that on our own server using I'm not really sure this is a great fix, but we changed there's a UMask option that PHP runs as, and we changed it so that PHP, when it writes files, will make them group writable and owner writable. And that solved the problem because now both Backdrop and the www user are both creating files that are group write, and so they can work together. But yeah, but it is complicated, and it's unfortunately way more complicated than we'd hoped for. But
yeah, CMI didn't necessarily make things less complicated than using features. It just created different problems, which
some different
kind of
problems.
All the initiatives of Drupal 8 seem to have done that.
Yeah, unfortunately for our introductory users, they probably are going to be treating config in a similar way as their database. We'll just export and import. And so this only becomes a problem if you're trying to manage using version control, which of course is like the big reason we made it.
Yes, that was the whole reason to begin with, and then that's the one thing it doesn't do.
It can. It's hard though. I will admit it. All right. Well, I think Jen and I, we have another meeting at 2 with the Civi folks, and so I think we've got to wrap this up. And yeah, we just have to continue discussing the virtues and downsides of that block configuration problem, because I can't really decide which one we should do either. Jen's in favor of basically doing all of them. I think.
Well, we could make it smarter than that, where like if you check the box, it copies it into another config file, and if you don't, it doesn't.
Right.
And then if you edit it later and check the box, it would copy it into a config file. And if you uncheck the box, it could delete the config file. I mean.
Yeah, it is possible to even start with what we have right now in the current pull request, and then adapt it to save to a different config file later. You're right.
Or you just make them all config files, and then if something does happen where there's too many config files or something, then we can start trying to. Anyway.
Yeah, or do it in reverse. Totally. Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna have to do this if I want it to get done.
Yeah, I'm afraid that might be the case.
Open source.
Yeah, but I'm sure Doc Wilmot will have some things to say. Like if you post that issue, he's the one that wrote the original patch, and he probably would be more than happy to have some additional collaboration there, even if it's in a different approach. Like I'm sure he'd love to discuss it. Okay, well, let's wrap up this meeting. And thank you, everybody, for joining, and thanks for the excellent discussion. Really appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.